You have now entered the Pretty Tough. Welcome to the Pretty Tough Room podcast. I'm your host, Adele P. And today's topic is mental health, caring for others. Now, last time we spoke about mental health, we talked about caring for your own mental health. And some of the things that we discussed that we could do to care for our own mental health was self care and avoiding burnout, because we oftentimes are caregivers and providers for families and at jobs. And so we discussed last time about some tips and tricks to be able to do that. Today, we're going to discuss how do we care for other people who have mental illness. Sometimes those mental illnesses that people have come from a crisis or some type or depression or anxiety. So, what do we say to other people or loved ones or friends? Or what do we do? How do we get them engaged with resources? Those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. My 3 points to care for others with respect to mental illness is one, recognize the warning signs. Two, acceptance and coping. And three, I'll provide you some resources and tips like where to go if you have a family member, loved one, or a friend who is dealing with mental illness. So, my first key thought in caring for the mental health of others is to recognize the warning signs and the symptoms. Pay close attention to sudden changes in behaviors and when they happen. When do they start? How often do they occur? So, what are some warning signs that we can look for? According to Mental Health America, for adults and young adults, the first warning sign that we can look for is confused thinking. So, if you're having a conversation or you're around a loved one, it doesn't even have to be a conversation. If you're around a loved one and they don't seem to be understanding, or interpreting things as sharply as they used to, or they misunderstand things that you guys may be either talking about or planning for, or things like that, and just confused all the time, not catching on to things. That's one warning sign for adults and young adults. Another warning sign would be prolonged depression. So we know that depression is a mental illness, right? People are diagnosed with depression on so many levels, and some are given or prescribed medication for that depression. But prolonged depression in this aspect, I mean like sadness or irritable, like they're always sad all the time, no matter what's going on. They never perk up or get happy about things, or they're just irritated all the time. Every time you say something to them, they get frustrated with you or someone else, or you just see them just angry, maybe not displaying that anger, but just people are getting on their nerves all the time, and it makes you think sometimes like, wow, are you never happy? Like, what's going on? Somebody, especially for those that are bubbly and happy most times, or that do things in their leisure time, like, you know, go outside and hang out with friends and things like that. But if you notice it now, that they're isolated and they don't want to talk much, or they don't want to be, you know, around other people. They want to just be left alone. That's that's a warning sign, in adults and young adults. Um, it also has excessive fears, worries, and anxiety. Now, I know that when I was going through my depression, um, I was always fearful. All I could think about was the negative things or the bad things could happen. I would I couldn't even watch TV or movies that had like happy endings, or, you know, love scenes or love songs and things like that. I just, you know, wanted to be in my room with the blinds down, no lights on, and kind of to myself. But I always was worrying about tomorrow or even the next minute. Like I'm just, I was so fearful of making any decisions because I felt like any decisions that I was gonna make was gonna be the wrong decision, or I was so anxious about what's next. I couldn't plan. I didn't even, you know, try to get up and get out of that state that I was in. I just was okay with where I was, not, you know, talking to my children or talking to any friends. You know, I didn't want to have no communication with people. And I was fearful in that because I knew that I was in a state that was different than what I used to be. And so I was fearful that other people would pity me, but not enough where I would get up and do something about it. And that takes me to, the fourth warning sign, which is social withdrawal. You don't, you know, hang out with your friends anymore. You don't receive calls anymore. You know, you don't go on your social media. You shut it down. You anything that has to do with being social, you just don't do it. So when you notice that other people that you know work with, or who you love, or who's in your family, starts to withdraw from daily activities that they used to do, that's a warning sign. In older children or pre-adolescents, you want to look for warning signs of substance use. I know right now it's common for people to, you know, when they want to get away from whatever it is that they're dealing with, they will turn to substances and even alcohol. So, you know, marijuana, I'm in California, right? So there's dispensaries all over the place. So it's readily accessible for those who just want to numb their mind from their reality. Or harder drugs like, you know, meth and cocaine and things like that. Um, Another warning sign for older children or adolescents is the inability to cope with problems. So if, you know, we got to pay attention to our youth and making sure that, you know, that they're able to come to us and have the conversations that need to be had, or that we are noticing that they're not able to deal with some of the things that's going on in their world, and making it comfortable for them to be open to us approaching them about whatever is going on, or being open enough so that they can come to us and, you know, without fear of judgment, being able to tell us that there is something going on, that they can't necessarily cope with. Changes in sleeping or eating habits. In older children and pre-adolescents, you know, sometimes people stress eat. So if you start to notice that a loved one or a friend is, you know, gaining a little bit of weight, and when you're around, you know why, because you're watching them, you know, their food consumption is, you know, much more than it was before. So you want to be able to, you know, watch for those types of things. And or they're sleeping too much or not enough. Every time you go over, you know, to a niece or nephew's house, or if you come home from work and you notice that your child is always in the room asleep. They're never, up moving around. They're not even on their cell phones because, in 2019, you look at a youth, they always got their cell phone on them. But if you come home or you're around a older child or an adolescent who is just isolated and in their rooms sleeping all the time, that's a warning sign as well. Now, with younger children, younger kids, you want to watch for things like the changes in their school performance. If their grades are dropping or if they're not engaged in, activities. They too, you can watch for sleeping habits, hyperactivity. If the child is just moving around so much, then you might want to, document it. You just keep an eye on it. And how often does this happen? And and if you try to do things, with us moms, well, parents, I'll say, when our kids are being busy, we're like, sit down somewhere, you're moving too much. And sometimes there could be something that's going on and why they're moving around so frequent or often, or jumping up and down on everything and touching everything. And while you're watching them, you feel like you then ran a marathon. You can pay attention to those things because that may be a warning sign of like, I think ADHD or something like that. So watch for a few of those things. And if you want to get a list of some of the things I mentioned, there's a lot more, but you can go ahead to the mentalhealthamerica.net, and I got some of these warning signs from off of that website and doing my research, just to be able to give you, a gist of some of the things. There's many more warning signs that you could watch for. So just go ahead over and take a peek at some of those things so that we can be mindful and to be able to help our loved ones with respect to mental illness. My second key point is to accept that your family or friend actually does have a mental illness and look into how you can assist them. See, ignoring or making excuses for others' behavior or their actions, like the changes in their actions or their thoughts, hinders that person's ability to get help. And it also hinders us from being a support for that person to get well. Sometimes people, when they hear mental health or mental illness, and it's someone that they care for that is experiencing it, they don't want to face the fact that that's actually happening, that that's actually something that someone they love and care for is going through. So we will tend to ignore it and pretend like it's really not that, and it's just something else. But we need to be honest with the diagnosis or the changes in the behavior to go get help or get a diagnosis so that we can help them through whatever it is that they may be dealing with. With the stigma of mental illness, people experiencing it or people who are living with a loved one with mental illness may look at it as some type of disease, or that I'm crazy, or their family member is crazy, because we tend to use that slang when there is somebody with mental illness, and I would like to think not purposefully, but when someone's a little off kilter, we're just we loosely say things like, he just crazy or she just crazy, and that stigma makes people not want to deal with mental illness or deal with a person with mental illness. So if we get in the know, get knowledge of what mental illness is, and start researching and encouraging our family and friends to seek help for it, then we could change the stigma around that and allow people to be comfortable in what the mental illness is, because it's not the end of the world that they have it, and there are ways that we can combat it. There are people who get rid of the mental illness because they are proactive in going to therapy, or allowing people to help them through, or just admitting that this is something that is real for your family member. Sometimes family members of mentally ill people blame themselves, especially if it's like genetic. Some people, it's genetic. Mental illness is genetic, it runs in the family. So we will take the blame for that, especially if it's our child or or if it's a sibling or something like that. We will take blame for either it happening because of us, or that we don't do enough of it, of helping them through it, I'll say. So, but it's not conducive for us to help our family members with mental illness if we start to blame ourselves, because then, we could become one of the people that have a mental health issue because we are taking on, responsibility in that way because our family member is dealing with this. But when we do feel like we blame ourselves, or have a concern of what other people might think of our family member because they have a mental illness, those feelings are normal. And many people experience these thoughts. But it's not enough to just be okay, with it, than it is to face it head on and fight through it so we can change ourselves and other people's way of thinking in context of mental health and mental illness. Find out all that you can about your loved one's mental illness. Like what mental illness are they dealing with? And then engage your loved one to do so too. So whatever you research, if you find out that someone you love and care for, has a mental illness, everything is on the internet these days. Go ahead and research, or find a crisis number, or something like that. Get in the know of what that mental illness is, some ways, things to look for in it, and things that your family member may be dealing with in context to that mental illness. And then openly and warmly share that information with your loved one who is dealing with that mental illness, because if we get involved in how to care for a person dealing with mental illness, and being exposed to it, then we can help, because what we don't understand helps us to understand when we put ourselves right in the middle of it. If we just get the information that we need, then we'll be able to understand it so that we can better help our loved ones. My third and final point is just a few tips to help us care for the mental health of others. Learn how to handle those with unusual behavior. So develop some type of plan or strategy for when a person with mental illness is displaying certain behaviors. When we're being mindful, or we're being observant, I'll say, to the behaviors or things that's happening with our family members who are, dealing with mental illnesses, we need to be sitting down and figuring out, okay, what do we do when this happens? And when this happens, how do we support our loved one in these episodes? Take it one idea at a time, and don't try to fix it all, because it's not your job to do that. Don't commit to some big old way of helping your loved ones. Leave that up to the professionals, and ask for tools from professionals that you could do with or for those people that are dealing with mental illness. So that helps so that you don't get burned out. If you take on too much, you yourself might begin to feel resentful towards the person that you're caring for, and then who is being helped? How does that help your loved one? We get frustrated sometimes with people who are dealing with mental illness, because sometimes it's a behavior that ends in outbursts of anger, or outbursts of crying. And we in public places, or you at home and you're trying to do one thing, and then your loved one may be dealing with an episode of something stemming from their mental illness, and we get frustrated with our loved one because we're dealing with it all the time. Sometimes it's good if we share the responsibilities with someone else. So talking with other family members and friends that are connected with that person dealing with mental health and asking like, how could you help me with this? Being okay to ask for help when you feeling overwhelmed or when you just want to be able to plan for, supporting this person who is dealing with mental health. When you are interacting with a person who deals with mental health, try your best to be joyful. Put a smile on your face, smile at them sometimes. And when you it's energy, that energy that you give off can help them if they're in moments where there's episodes that they are displaying. So just try your best to be happy, in happy moods when you're interacting with your family members who are living with mental illness. Establish a support network. Again, sharing the responsibilities with someone else, getting a group of people, like a squad. Like, listen, this is our loved one, this is our friend. We got to come together and make sure that we're doing everything that we could do, to help them through this situation. Get counseling if they're not already seeking counseling, and research and find out, and then go with that person so it makes them more comfortable. Be as involved as you can so that you can help that person dealing with mental illness be a little bit more comfortable with what they're dealing with. And then after all of those things, because we're talking about caring for the mental health of others, you want to go back to the conversation we had before about caring for your own mental health. Make sure that you take time out for yourself. If you are living with a loved one who is dealing with mental illness, it's really important for you to take a pause sometimes and go and do something good for yourself. That self-care we discussed. Being able to go out, get your nails done, get your toes polished, go get a massage or something like that. Listen to some music that calms you. Go hang out with some friends, but make sure that if you are the one who is the caregiver of a person who's dealing with mental health, that you always be intentional about caring for yourself, because we can't be no good to anyone if we're not good to ourselves. In conclusion, we just need to know that we sometimes think of mental illness with respect to our loved ones as a misfortune that or that we didn't or don't do enough about, or that we're cursed with this thing. But the truth is, everyone has mental health needs. Some of us just have more of a specific need that requires much more attention. So recognizing, accepting, and finding resources for those you care about can help us help us and them to cope with and live healthier in caring for those with mental illnesses. For right now, crisis is for a loved one, and even for yourself. If you yourself are dealing with mental illness, or you have someone that you either live with, or you work with, or you care for that needs something like right now, there is a 24-hour crisis center hotline if you need to seek help immediately. And that number is 1-800-273-8255. You can also call your local 211 to get resources or information on where you could go in your community, in your city, for anyone, including yourself, that's dealing with mental health. There's a website also, NAMI. NAMI is really big with mental health. If you go to their website, you can find a plethora of information on mental health, the different mental illnesses, the what to do's. There's so much information on that website. They have an 800 number, and it's 1-800-950-NAMI, NAMI, 1-800-950-NAMI, and their website is www.nami.org. And when you go on there, I promise you, there was so much information on there that it was really tedious for me to pick out what it was I wanted to place on the podcast for this month, because it's just amazing information out there to help us for ourselves or for our loved ones dealing with mental illness. Um, any information that I talked about today, I got it all off of mentalhealthamerica.net. You can go there too and get a plethora of information that's there for dealing with mental health, for understanding mental health. There's even links on there for you to go and get first aid mental health training. It's an 8-hour course that you could take. You can look up in your area where those classes are. I'm not sure if they're online or not, but I know that you can actually get a certification in mental health first aid. And you can find that information on the mentalhealthamerica.net website. Well, thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to like our pages at the Pretty Tough Room on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And remember, tough times never last, but tough people do.